Welcome to this continuation of a series of interviews with noted scholars on the content of the We the People, the Citizen and the Constitution text of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Greg Bernstein, Senior Consultant to the Center, and I will be your host for the series. Unit 3 of the text focuses on how the Constitution has been changed to further the ideals contained in the Declaration of Independence. Our guest scholar today to talk about Unit 3 is Vikram Amar, Dean of the University of Illinois College of Law and the Iwan Foundation Professor of Law. Vic, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start with Lesson 15. How have amendments and judicial review changed the Constitution? So, let me start out by asking, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the amendment processes contained in the Constitution? And why has only one of those procedures been used?
So first, let's outline the processes that the Constitution does mention for its own amendment in Article 5. Two-thirds of the House and Senate can get together and agree to propose an amendment, in which case it takes three-quarters of the states to ratify before the amendment is recognized. And at Congress's election, the ratification can be done either by state legislatures or by special conventions that are created in each state. Then there's another provision in Article 5 that says if two-thirds of the state legislatures petition for a convention to create and consider constitutional amendments, then a convention shall be put together and proposals can emerge from that, which again require ratification from the states. So if you ask what are the advantages of this kind of process, I think you should focus on the fact that there are supermajorities involved at all the stages. You need two-thirds of the House, two-thirds of the Senate, three-quarters of the state legislatures. And that has the advantage of encouraging deliberation. It's a slow, cumbersome process, and we don't go forward with an amendment as a nation unless there's broad consensus among a large supermajority of the people. For example, 13 states can block an amendment because that's just a little bit more than 1/4 of the states, and you need 3/4 to pass it. And the smallest 13 states may have less than 20 million people living in them. So the views or desires of 20 million people could block the views of the other 300 million of us. And so this by design is a very conservative and supermajoritarian process, but that makes it very deliberative and careful. It also requires a broad geographical consensus because it's hard to get 38 states unless you're picking up states throughout the country. So those what I would say would be its advantages. Its disadvantages are that it's so cumbersome that it's not used very often. We've only had 27 amendments since the Constitution was created, and actually fewer than that because the original Bill of Rights plus the most recent 27th Amendment were part of a package of original amendments that were tied to the ratification of the Constitution itself. So we've had far fewer than that, on the order of 15 that have been enacted over 200 years. And that maybe is too slow to truly keep the Constitution up to date with the times. On top of that, any supermajoritarian procedure is going to be under attack in the sense that it doesn't always reflect the will of the people. It's nice to have a process that calls on all of us to think about higher politics rather than ordinary, passionate, emotion-driven politics. But the question is whether Article 5 overdoes that in one direction. Now, you asked why all of the amendments have gone through Congress rather than having a constitutional convention called on by two-thirds of the states. I think the reason we haven't had a constitutional convention is no one knows what would happen if we opened one up. It would be wide open to revisit not just perhaps the original problems that led to the creation of a convention, but may open up everything going back to the beginning, and some people are understandably afraid of that can of worms.